You are listening to the Ready PDM Network.
This episode is brought to you by Under 10 Consulting. For many organizations, it seems products get released by individual heroics. Yet most organizations need a small number of living documents, fewer than 10, to manage their products and services. Contact Under 10 for a product playbook designed specifically for your organization.
Are you ready?
Customer understanding work. So, doing qualitative research projects for people who didn't have that expertise internally. They were at a period where they were starting to stagnate, and so they needed to really look at the information that they had on their customers in their industry and decide what their next direction was going to be.
It is that being willing to ask for money for what you do. It's very hard. There's always a book in there somewhere. Okay. Everybody's got a book in there somewhere.
Hello, Ready Product Radio heads, and welcome to another exciting episode of Ready Product Radio. This week's episode features a discussion with Panoptika partners Megan and Steve Wilson. It was recorded at Product Camp Atlantic 2015, of which Megan and Steve were organizers. We talk about their consulting practice, Panoptika, and the many ways companies can benefit from outsourcing important product work, when either they lack the bandwidth or the skill set to do it effectively themselves. This discussion will be of interest to product teams who may be thinking they have to do it all themselves, as well as product people who may be thinking about starting their own practice. Ready Product Principle number 23 is it's better to outsource critical product work than ignore or delay it. Enjoy the show. Okay, Megan and Steve from Panoptika, welcome to Ready Product Radio. I know we know each other from a few years back at the Toronto Product Management Association. For our listeners, an introduction of yourselves?
Sure. So we're a consulting company. We work with clients who have services, products. We're pretty much vertical agnostic, I guess, and very interested in helping folks use customer understanding to build better products and services.
Yeah, that's a good nutshell description of what we do. I mean, we work with companies big and small. Sometimes it's where they need a little extra bandwidth and helping them along the way. Sometimes it's refereeing their internal discussions because everyone hears what the customer says in a different way. And sometimes they need a little help with that interpretation.
Excellent. So, and I guess we can say that we're here in Halifax. We're at Product Camp Atlantic 2015. Thank you for inviting me here. And we're actually at the Innova Center. Is that what it's called?
So it's the InnovaCore Enterprise Center. Okay. So it is an incubator for ICT. They have one ICT building. They have another that's life science focused, and they help companies who are getting launched in Atlantic Canada to get on their feet, help them find funding, and try and help be part of creating a community, an ecosystem of innovation here in Atlantic Canada.
Yeah, and so they're technically, I guess, a public sector venture capital organization, but they've been extremely supportive of Product Camp, and they believe that product management is a discipline which should be developed in order to have a successful business environment.
That's great. That's great. Good. Well, listen, I know the first question that most of my listeners are going to have for you guys is I know a lot of people from, for example, the Toronto Product Management Association have tried to go the consulting route, and what they've heard back consistently is, sorry, we use consultants for other things like marketing and sales and things like that, maybe business development, but product management, that's got to be a core function. Full-time hire, I don't even want to hire you as a contractor. So first question for you guys is, how did you crack that nut to go in? Because a lot of the conversations it sounds like you're having are product conversations with your customers. How did you crack that nut?
It is that being willing to ask for money for what you do. It's very hard. And a lot like if you've got any women who like to knit sweaters, everyone wants you to do that for free and no one will ever pay what it's worth. But I think it's demonstrating project by project that you can get in, and don't expect to get in a large way. Expect to start off in a small way. When you're having a conversation with someone who's a potential client and they say, I've got this problem, and it's a pretty small one that you think is simple to fix, offer to fix it, set a price to fix it, and see if you can't get in that way. As you demonstrate your expertise, it just gets better and better. And this, as in many other roles, product managers move from company to company. They don't often have a lifelong career with one business any longer, and they will bring you with them when they go somewhere else. And pretty soon they tell two friends and they tell two friends.
Yeah, and there are still a lot of companies out there that don't have product managers per se. They have people who are doing the roles that product management needs to do. And so sometimes you can go in and help them to focus their effort and be that extra set of hands to deal with particular rough patch or a particular project that they're doing. And so it's not so much, the attitude is not so much going in to be your contract product manager. It's, I'm going to come in and do some of the tasks that you need done that you don't have someone capable of doing right now. So you spend a lot of time researching companies and working with companies to have them understand, where there are some gaps that you might be able to fill.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. And did you guys start out that way, or were you doing other things and then you slowly built up a client base?
I was in consulting and Steve was in an industry job when we started our business. We had talked for a long time about starting this business together. I left the company I was in consulting after a takeover, and then Steve's company got merged and purged as well. And we thought it would be a great idea to be unemployed together at the same time. So that's really how we got started. And we were fortunate to have a couple of friends who kind of gave us a little foot in the door by giving us one or two small projects that they needed some hands-on with, that they just needed overflow. And we did that. And then we could say, oh, we worked with so-and-so, and here we are. And that kind of got a foot in the door and got us going, I think.
Yeah, and a lot of it was really basic customer understanding work. So, doing qualitative research projects for people who didn't have that expertise internally, and working with them on turning the things they did know about their customers into business plans. And gradually what happened was we developed a base of customers who invited us to be more at the strategy table, to help them to understand with their industry and with their customers what effect that has on the strategic decisions that they were making, and then driving that down to the tactical level. So, because it's much more important to be at the table where the decisions are being made rather than just being, the contractor with a foot in the door.
Right. Excellent. Yeah. And is it across, all verticals, or do you guys tend to focus on one vertical versus another? Stay away from government maybe, or? Sometimes
we get immersed in one. Here in Atlantic Canada, you can't stay away from government because government pays for everything, even in the private sector, to a great degree. So there's a lot of that here. But in our clients in other jurisdictions, we've been in some verticals where we had background ourselves, but then those clients have moved into new verticals and realized the work was translatable. So then we traveled with them wherever they went. So I used to, for instance, do no work at all in packaged goods, but I've done some work in the last few years in face cream and textile development and all kinds of things that I never thought I'd get involved with.
Yeah, we like things that are really interesting and maybe a little complex. Understanding human relationships is very complex, and human relationships to products is even more complex. So really the common thread that runs through a lot of things we do is there are things where we have to learn a lot about your industry and your company before we can be comfortable giving you advice. So the name Panoptika, pan being everything, optica seeing, so seeing everything. So context is important when you're making business decisions. And so just trying to make a business decision based on some sort of black box is not, that's not appropriate. You need to understand the consequences of what you're doing and the effect that it's going to have in your marketplace and in your company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. So what, maybe you can each share an example of the type of interesting, complex challenges. Like, don't mention any names if it's confidential, but the types of projects that you're getting into, because I imagine it's quite a wide range. So,
sure. I'm by background a marketer, but the thing about me is that I'm sort of the anti-marketer's marketer. So I don't believe that using big catalogs or fancy ads to sell soup, soap, or shampoo are our highest calling. What we should be doing is understanding customers, and pull marketing is where it should be. So I look for clients who have an openness to want to listen to people, find out what they need, and build, purpose build that or adapt what they have to fit that and help them solve those kinds of problems. In the last year, some of the projects Steve and I have both been involved with have been everything from helping a university professor who has a technology he's developed and seems to have some legs in industry, figure out whether or not it was in fact interesting enough to take the next stage of commercializing it. We've worked with pharmaceutical companies looking at wanting to come into Canada and establish a beachhead here with a product that wasn't sold in the market, and needing to understand that how those things are sold here is completely different than where their product was developed. Maybe you want to talk about some of the others.
We had a small company here who 99% of the products that they make are sold outside of Canada, but they were in a period where they were starting to stagnate, and so they needed to really look at the information that they had on their customers and their industry and decide what their next direction was going to be, and whether it was going to be incremental or whether they were going to have to leap into some new technological area. And we worked through with their internal team a couple of days doing various exercises, including innovation games, which is an awesome technique we've been using for quite a number of years now. And the interesting thing about that was not only did it identify some business opportunities, but it also identified where there were some conflicts and challenges within their own organization, which needed to be addressed before they were able to take advantage of the market opportunities. And so they've had quite a shift internally based on just getting a bunch of people together in a room to work through some of the problems and challenges that exist.
And you offer the benefit of not being partisan to any particular department. So
absolutely, we're the United Nations, except cheaper.
Yeah, that's good. So the other thing I was thinking about, asking you guys is do you plan on continuing to do this? Do you envision maybe packaging up what you've learned in as some kind of book or product or something? Because I imagine there's a ton that you've learned going through this exercise. What's common, most engagements, what customers mostly get stuck on. Any thoughts about that in the future, maybe, or?
There's always a book in there somewhere.
Okay.
Everybody's got a book in there somewhere. It would make my parents extremely proud. My parents would be extremely proud to know that they spent that money on that English degree for something. So I'll say yes, there's a book in there somewhere.
Awesome. That'd be great.
One of the things we really have been talking a lot about doing, and it's certainly in keeping. We're just around the time we're doing this interview, the Canadian election has taken place, and we've had a change for good, in that the party that came out on top was promoting a message of hope, not a message of hate. And we really like that, and we would like to incorporate some of the things that we've learned, the techniques and the facilitation, into helping governments and other social enterprises to become more successful. And so, again, our friend Luke Homan has a website called Every Voice Matters.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
I think I've heard that.
he's very keen on getting government organizations to engage their customers, their citizens, in making decisions that impact their lives from day to day. So, and we believe that too. So that's probably something we'll embark on next.
And Luke's definitely on my aspirational list once I get a little better at this and get a little bit bigger audience. So maybe I'll ask you guys for a connection there at some point. So let's talk a little bit more about Panoptika. Is it just the two of you, or do you bring in additional people as needed?
We do have a whole host of folks we work with on occasion. Most of the time you get us, and what you're buying are us, one of us or both of us together. We come in and then we bring in other folks as necessary. So just as an example, in Canada, because we're a bilingual country, we often have to talk to customers in a different language. So we've got a whole team of folks who are, well versed in what we do in Quebec, translators and bilingual moderators who can come in and work with a team who speaks French or something like that. Contacts pretty much all over the world for bringing in if we have country-specific needs. So those are the kinds of things. And folks who do technical writing for us or other bits and pieces, we've got whole little groups of contacts that we've learned to trust that they will deliver what our customers come to expect from us.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into the next question I was going to ask is, do you do work internationally, North America? Is there a geographic boundary to what you guys will look at, or?
Have suitcase, will travel.
We do have clients who from all over the world, but mostly they're doing work in Canada and the U.S. So those are the markets that they're interested in. But there's no reason we've been working with some Canadian clients who are trying to develop export markets, and so because of the to make it cost effective, we've often connected them with people in our network, say who would be in Germany or France or Italy or Australia or whatever. Because it does cost a lot to travel to those places. Yeah. But, we're happy to engage with anyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm getting the sense that networking is really key for you guys, both on the customer side and on the supplier side. So that's probably good advice as well for, like I say, some product managers that are thinking that they want to maybe take a similar type of approach.
Absolutely. The key to networking is to network when you don't need to. It's that we've during talks we've seen from you, Alan. We've seen this give to give, don't give to get, and the same thing for networking. Network because it's the right thing to do, not because oh my gosh, I need a job now. Yeah. That just doesn't work. The more that you engage with people freely and openly, we're great believers in open source. You get back what you give, but you can't go into it expecting to get an immediate return.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good approach. So you guys, another question I have here, is you guys are also not just partners in business, but you're partners in life as well. So, any thoughts on that? Is that something you're comfortable, talking about how you make that work? Because I imagine it's something a lot of people would look at with awe and wonder that you could work with somebody.
We get that question a lot.
Okay, good.
And
I can edit it out if you don't like the question.
No, I guess part of part of the thing, it seems natural to us, but one of the key things is initially we set up boundaries. So we always have an office space that we can close at the end of the day. Whether it's physically or metaphorically, the office door is closed. And we try not to bring work-related issues into our personal life. But when people say, "How can you work with your spouse?" So, well, if you can't work with them, how can you live with them? What is it? What is the relationship? I mean, so it works for us. I know it doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah, I think that we have been working together for quite a long time, and we started off as friends, not going in a romantic direction. So that probably was helpful as well. But yeah, you have ways of working, and in fact, we have different things we like. One of the things we think is a strength we bring to clients is that our approach is very different. So by background, I've been in the sort of customer understanding marketing kind of side of things in a number of very different industries. And Steve has been in a wide range of roles, including product management and everything from finance to customer discovery to supply chain in a couple of very specific industries. And so we almost have this kind of XY approach that we bring to things. And so we challenge each other when we go back to our clients and say, is this the right answer? We also have very different personalities. If you want someone who will tell you what to do and will not sugarcoat it, and you will know that your baby is ugly, I'm your man. And if you want someone who is much more diplomatic, Steve is most definitely your man.
Yeah, a civil engineer.
Nice. Yeah, and one of the reasons I was asking that is I know even launching this podcast initially, I thought about doing a partnership, and then I listened to a lot of podcasts by podcasters for podcasters, and they said, that adds a lot of complexity to it. You might want to think about starting by yourself, but by the same token, like you say, you can certainly cover a much bigger grid if you've got complementary skills. So that's excellent. So what would you say, like the themes that we're talking about here at Product Camp Atlantic 2015? What I'm hearing a lot of is listening to customers is really a key piece. So maybe we can just drill into that one. So any thoughts that you guys have learned from your engagements in terms of best practices for listening to customers and how to go about that, and maybe some examples of how you've seen it, without naming names, how you've seen it go poorly as well?
One of the things is sugarcoating what you expect the customer to believe, or trying to layer that on top of what they're saying. It's very hard to be an objective listener. And I'm a great believer in getting folks in the room with their customer. One of the reasons that works so well is it's very hard to say, oh, they're stupid, they're not really my customer, or they don't understand me. It's easy to say that when you're in a focus group room and you're behind the glass. You can call them names, you can say things, you can check your phone. When you're in the room sitting at the table, you're on the entire time, and you need to be diplomatic and sensitive and actually be seen to be listening. So that's a very important part, I think, of the story of what you need to do with customers.
Yeah, and we've been doing a lot of work with the Lean Canvas methodology, and we work with a lot of startups where the product manager is a founder or the co-founder, and just working with them on ways and techniques of getting out of their own way when they're having the customer conversation. We teach them a lot about pitching, about developing their elevator pitch and developing this, that, and the other. We don't teach them enough about listening. As your mother might have said, there are reasons there's a reason why you have 2 ears and only one mouth. They should be used in that proportion. In fact, we believe that when you are a product manager or a founder talking to a potential customer, you should be listening more than 90% of the time. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to understand their problems, you're trying to understand their context, you're trying to understand how, if they have a problem, how they're solving it now, how are they really invested in trying to solve it, or are you just fooling yourself that you think that they really like the shiny thing that you've invented? And so just the techniques that we've learned over the past 15 years in terms of structuring a qualitative discussion really fit very well into the conversation that a product manager is having with a customer. That
that sort of goes to some of the services we deliver. So we have sort of really large or full-scale engagements where we're quite embedded in a company, helping them do a lot of stuff. We've had some young managers we've worked with who are just learning the business of product management because in their company, as in many companies, they didn't even know they were a product manager. They're not called a product manager. They didn't know such a thing existed. And we'll go in and we'll help them make a roadmap. They know a conversation they need to have with a customer. They know some questions they need to get answered. But they don't have a sense of how do I prioritize those questions? That if you roll the conversation out in a different way, it will go more smoothly. That the person will be kindly disposed to answer if you don't ask the hardest question first. And so we'll often just help them develop a little roadmap. It's a few hours consulting time. It's not very expensive, but it saves them a whole world of hurt when they go to talk to the customer about that sensitive thing. So that's an example of something simple you can do to kind of get started with a new client. And if there's someone in the client company who trusts you and knows you already.
Yeah, and if you guys were to pick let's say a number two after listening to the customer that you see as a common theme in your work, what would that be? Would it be something different, something around the product side or around the internal communication side, or what?
I think it's finding a way to turn what you've learned. It's great to listen. I mean, we do believe in listening. But unless you do something with that, unless there's an action that comes out of it, then you've wasted everyone's time, including the customers. So beginning with a plan in mind that says, let's have a roadmap that says, what will I do with these findings or this information when I get the answer? If you don't know that, don't start until you do. I think that's a big thing we help people discover is, what, just like you do with the product or with a new feature, our new feature is, how will I use that new feature, the customer information, when I get it?
Yeah, the other thing that we've been thinking of and talking a lot about with people is people are there's this whole we got to fail faster, learn, there's an expression, you win or you learn. And so there's, what can we learn from our failures? What can we learn from our failures? What can we learn from well, we think more companies need to be looking at what do we learn from our success. So we coined a phrase that you suggested maybe might be copyrightable, and that'd be great if we can.
Root cause failure analysis.
Root cause success analysis.
There you go.
Okay, because our friend the other Alan Armstrong does a lot of win-loss analysis, and oftentimes he gets the pushback, we only want you to talk to the accounts that we lost. And he will emphasize that it's also important to talk to the ones where you win, because you can be fooled by your wins unless you truly understand why the customer chose to do business with you, to buy your product, to buy your service. You don't know whether that's a repeatable and scalable thing. There are more startups get killed by having by not knowing why that first user came on board with them, because it's likely you don't really know the reason. You're patting yourself on the back saying, man, we made the greatest whatever. And in the meantime, the customer is saying, boy, that was really cheap. We would have paid 10 times that. And you just don't know. And so unless you can understand it, so we would try to encourage people to look more at why they're being successful, not just at why they're failing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just in terms of full disclosure, I recently interviewed Alan, and he's a sponsor of the podcast. So we live in a small world, and it gets smaller every year. I get older, it seems. Yes. So I think we're coming up on time. I know we've got to get back to the session. There's a question that I try to ask everybody, and on this podcast, because a lot of our listeners are younger, they're earlier in their careers, and maybe they can learn both from our successes and our failures. So I guess I'll start with you, Steve. The question is, if you could go back and talk to the 25-year-old Steve, and give him some business advice, what would that advice be?
Take more chances. When we're young, we think that every step that we take is so vitally important that if we don't make the right job choice, if we don't choose the right educational program, that our life is going to be ruined. And in fact, we're in our sort of probably third iteration. I mean, I'm a civil engineer by education, and then I got into marketing and logistics and market research and consulting, and so you never know where your life is going to take you. Don't be afraid to make some mistakes along the way. Yeah.
I think that I certainly received similar, advice to Steve from some of my mentors, and I would say that is, that's something really important. If you don't have a mentor, you need a mentor. I don't care how far you've come in your career, how successful you are. If you're at the top of the heap, there's still somebody who knows more than you do and can give you some guidance. Find that person and listen to them and take their advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
Absolutely. Excellent. And be a mentor. And better than that, be a sponsor. Open doors for people.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, well, let's get back to the session. So, I'd like to thank you, Steve and Megan, for being on the podcast. Very much appreciate the time, and thank you for the invite to come out to the conference here. It's been great. So, thank you very much.
Great,
you're
thanks,
very welcome.
Our pleasure.
Wish you'd be able to stay longer.
Okay. Talk to you later, guys. Today's podcast was brought to you by Under 10 Consulting. Get your product teams up to speed quickly with the latest methods and a proven process tailored to your organization. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ready Product Radio, part of the Ready PDM network. This is when most podcasters ask you to leave a review on iTunes if you like the show. My only request is if you found the show entertaining, inspiring, or informative, please share it with a colleague or friend who may feel the same way. Also, note that the views expressed in this episode do not necessarily reflect my views or the views of the Ready PDM network. If you want yourself or your product to be ready, then keep your eyes on your markets, your ears to your customers, your mind on their experiences, both good and bad, and finally, keep your hearts on your products. Until next time, thank you for listening. You can contact us on Twitter at Ready Product Radio. That's RDYPRODUCTRADIO. And on the web at www.readyproductradio.com.
Chief, mate, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.